And in the epistle today, St. James provides us with the clearest biblical answer to the absurdity of speaking of faith and works as separate things. The whole argument is ridiculous. Any argument from a Bible-believing Christian that all you need is faith is destroyed by what St. James says explicitly in this passage, and of course also by our Lord in many ways in the gospel as well. But I want to focus on the fact that James does speak about what faith really is and how important it is, because I want to talk about faith just a little bit this evening in light of the theme I'm speaking about. But before I do, I want to remind you, I want to talk today in this series particularly about morality and how it relates our relationship with God. But I want to go back and remind you of what I said 2 weeks ago when we spoke about justice. I said that religion, in its proper sense, understood properly, is the virtue by which we worship. We give God the worship that we owe Him. It is out of justice. Even if we don't understand and accept the fact that God really wants a personal, loving relationship with each one of us, we at least owe Him worship and devotion because He is God and we are not. We all creatures ought to glorify God, but because we have been given an intellect and a will like the angels, we have a particular obligation to glorify God in a way that other creatures do not. Now, obviously our relationship with God should go beyond that, beyond justice, to love. We spoke about charity as well. And when it comes to loving God, if you want to understand what loving God really means, it's very simple. Jesus Himself tells us at the Last Supper, if we love Him, keep His commandments. Now, we who like to think of things legally find that incongruous with the Christian faith, but that's because we're looking at two legally. The reason why this is absolutely about a relationship with God is because it's about love. God's commandments are nothing more than a blueprint for love. Therefore, to love God is to will, to want, and to do what He does. Because if He is love and what He commands is love, then love means doing what He commands. We'll talk about the love of neighbor in the following weeks. But before we speak any more about the commandments, I do want to take a moment and talk about the other two theological virtues. We've spoken about charity, which is the greatest of them, but we also need to talk about faith and hope, particularly faith. Now, many of us think of the definition of faith as St. Paul gives it to the Hebrews, of believing in things that are not seen. And that's absolutely true, of course. But it's limited. It's not the whole definition of faith. The way Bishop Tanqueray writes it, he says, faith is a theological virtue that inclines the mind under the influence of the will and of grace to yield a firm assent to revealed truths because of the authority of God. Let's make that just a little bit more digestible by turning it into questions, all right? Whom do we believe? We believe God because He reveals Himself. What do we believe? We believe everything that He's taught us and teaches us through His Holy Catholic Church. Why do we believe? This is where it gets tricky. We believe because of the divine authority of the God who reveals it and the fact that He is completely trustworthy. And how do we believe? Well, we believe with our intellect, but we're moved to believe by our will. In other words, it's a choice. But it's also under the movement and influence of grace. Faith is a gift as well. It's not something that we choose without the grace of God. Now, it's certainly possible that we experience temptations to question or to reject our holy faith. And we should respond to these like good soldiers of Christ and champions of Our Lady. When the world and the devil ask us whether all of this is really true, then that we have to just simply dismiss as an unfounded temptation. Because an outright rejection of all of this is clearly diabolic. But when we have specific doubts about particular things, we have to hold to our belief and yet still seek clarification and understanding. And this is particularly true when most people are taught the Holy Catholic faith at the First Communion level, just to pass the test that Father is going to give them, and then you don't see them again forever until they're ready for another sacrament. You can't address real-world issues beyond a 6 or 7-year-old level with that kind of information. You don't have that's not enough for you to deal with life, which is why a lot of our young people simply fall away. A lot of our adults who might be here, especially if they're here being dragged here by their wives, often do not really believe, but they're just trying to make her happy, which is certainly a noble goal, but we want to really understand. And the reason I have no problem saying this and emphasizing this is the fact that all of the doubts are addressable. The Holy Catholic faith is completely reasonable. It may be beyond the grasp of the scientific method, but that doesn't mean it's not true. It simply means the scientific method cannot prove those kinds of things that we believe. And so I would certainly encourage those who have any doubts about particular things to go and look for proper answers. Come speak to me if you need to. And certainly, please, for the love of God, don't be looking at people on YouTube and TikTok necessarily trying to get your answers to the faith, because most of it's going to be nonsense. In one sense, as C.S. Lewis puts it, faith is the art of holding on to things that your reason has already accepted in spite of your changing moods. Hope is the theological virtue that makes us desire God as our highest good and expect with a firm confidence eternal bliss and the means of attaining it because of God's goodness and power. Hope is faith directed towards the future, and it is that same trust and confidence in God that He will bring things to the right conclusion because He's promised it and because He has the ability to bring it about, of course, as long as we cooperate. So, with all of that in mind, let's look at some of the particular aspects of our relationship with God as governed by the first 3 commandments. And I'll have to tell you, as a confessor, don't worry, I'm not going to reveal anyone's confessions here, but I will say, in general, that this is not a commandment that is confessed. These 3 are not confessed very regularly. Certainly, most people in our society are not bowing down to statues of Zeus in their homes. But there are other ways that these commandments are broken. So the first commandment forbids the worship of other gods. Now, there certainly is a rising paganism in our society. This commandment addresses a number of things. It addresses worshiping any other god, which would be idolatry. It includes superstition with divination and sorcery. It includes irreligion, which is disrespecting holy persons, places, or things, and simony, the buying or selling of holy things. The first commandment, again, is not normally broken by outright historic paganism. The first commandment is broken in different ways in our day, although there is, again, rising superstition and paganism, and it's very prevalent in social media, in our schools, and everywhere. And our young people are learning it because they're not learning the faith properly. There's also, at least certainly among the Mexicans, a growing devotion to the devil under the title of the Santa Muerte, the Holy Death. That's what the devil does. Ultimately, he cultivates a cult of death, and this has usurped in a lot of places the proper holy faith. But for most of us, our idolatry is when we burn incense to ourselves. When we choose things other than God, or we choose other people over God, or other activities over our religious duties. Football, soccer, or football is one of the biggest idols in the West because of how it usurps our hearts, our minds, our time, etc. Not saying there's anything wrong with that. Soccer is actually the best team sport there is. You know, more people should play it. But they should not be missing Mass because of it. Again, our idolatry is of other things. There are people who, in lieu of worshiping God in church, worship their pillows on Sunday mornings. Usually because they don't know how to stop partying early enough on Saturday evening. So again, we do break the first commandment. Any sin is breaking the first commandment, but there are things that we do put before God, and that is contrary to the first commandment. The second commandment's actually fairly straightforward. The second commandment, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And it forbids directly dishonoring God by profaning his name, and also forbids misusing his name in oaths and vows, etc. Blasphemy would be the direct insulting of God. And profanity, the other major way that this commandment is broken, is the misuse of his name. Profanity is not words, which I won't say from the pulpit, right? They're not just crude words. Profane specifically means that you are disrespecting God's name. So when you say God in anything other than a prayer, when you use the name Jesus in anything other than actually directly addressing him, then you are profaning his name. You should not do that any more than you would want your name used anytime someone else stubs their toe. So, the third commandment is the one I want to end on and focus just a little bit more than the others, because this one is broken very commonly, but not just in the obvious ways. One of the reasons why I preach as much on the liturgy as I do and give so much emphasis to it is because it's imperative that you learn and understand the Mass, not just so that I stop getting criticized all the time for the choices I make, but so that you can pray better and enter into the liturgy more. Because I don't want you here simply because the church has the power to tell you that if you miss Sunday Mass, you are committing a grave sin and your soul is in danger. That's true, and you shouldn't miss Sunday Mass or Holy Days of Obligation because that is a grave sin and your souls are in danger. But that is fear, not love. And the reason that we should be here is out of love, because of all the love that we've been shown. We worship God in the special way that he has given us. I forgot to mention it this morning, but the example I always use with people is, I ask the guys, if you're dating or if you're married, do you give her the kind of flowers she likes or the kind of flowers that you like? Most people, most Catholics who know better, that say, oh, I just worship God in my own way, are like the guy saying, oh, I just get her the flowers that I like. Which, guys, just as a hint, that doesn't work, right? That's not the way it happens. So just, that's not the right attitude we should have towards God either, right? We worship him in the way that he has given us because ultimately that's better for us. So our duty, part of justice, is to attend Mass on Sundays and Holy Days of Obligation. We should do so out of love, and therefore we would attend Mass on more than just Sundays. There are valid reasons why people don't go to Mass on weekdays, and there are valid reasons why they don't go on certain Sundays either. But they have to be real valid reasons and not just excuses. One of the simplest ones is, if you are sick, especially if you are contagious, please don't come to Mass, right? You don't have to confess, I missed Mass because I was in bed ill. That's not a sin, okay? If your child is at home sick, please take care of your child, okay? If you're on vacation anywhere other than Antarctica, use those cell phones for something helpful and just look up Catholic Church near me. It's better than crushing candy, okay? Or whatever else you do on them. Now, not everyone has one, but I've seen enough people to where it's a very rare exception. Do your homework and look up where Mass is and plan your trip around it. Again, there are other reasons. Working on Sunday. Some people have to work on Sunday. Even some teenagers work on Sunday, not because they want a better cell phone, because that's not a legitimate reason, but there are many teenagers who actually are contributing to the support of their family, and that's legitimate. There are issues with not being your own boss. There's issues with not being able to find work in the local area necessarily that allows you to not to be off on Sunday, etc., etc. So there are a lot of factors. You have to decide if it's necessary or if you're just missing Mass. And I would be glad to speak about that. Our economy, certain people's immigration status, etc., make it such that that's difficult. However, for those who cannot regularly attend on Sunday, or even if it's just once in a while, go to Mass another time. Talk to me. I have the power to move your obligation if it's for a legitimate reason. But go to Mass, because regardless of whether you're here on Sunday or not, you need Mass. You need the Eucharist. Otherwise, Jesus would not have given it to us. The other aspect of Sunday, and this is where I think many of us probably should go to confession, at least to some degree of this, is that Sunday is a day of rest. That means no unnecessary work. Now, I always have to tell children, washing the dishes is necessary work. So don't use Sunday as an excuse to tell your parents that you can't do that. Okay? But beyond that, we should not be doing unnecessary work. We should plan ahead so that you're not leaving for Sunday things that you can't do, because in addition to work or homework, you've got sports for hours and hours in the evening, and all the other myriad of activities that we take our time with, and suddenly you find yourself on Sunday needing to shop and do errands because you have not managed your time well. Again, there is necessary work, but is the work that we do on Sunday necessary? And we have to also be very careful about making other people work. It's one of the reasons why shopping should not be done on Sunday unless absolutely necessary. Because if you're shopping, then other people are working to provide it. Again, I'm speaking in general terms. There are certain social services and such which are perfectly legitimate, right? But I do know that in general, our society needs to be better about not offending our Lord by profaning the Sabbath, by not working on Sunday, and by giving time to prayer and to family. Now, for a lot of people I know, that is going to be very difficult because they're not used to it. They find themselves at home, all right, Father's taught us and we finally accepted, we shouldn't be working. Now what? Because we're not used to spending time together as a family. We don't know what to do to just sit and rest, which is one of the reasons why God gave us the Sabbath. So, this is something we can talk about more individually if you'd like. I'd be glad to hear your confession on this subject. But it's something that we need to take seriously because, again, all of these have to do with our relationship with God. And beyond the fact that it is a sin to profane His holy name and to profane the Sabbath, the Sabbath has been made for man and not man for the Sabbath. God has given us this rest because we need it. And therefore we need to learn how to live it better for His greater glory and our salvation.